based in Harlem, USA, Amsterdam News, 125th Street, and sponsored by the Tenant Association, Resident Association of Grant Houses. And, of course, the communicators does not reflect the views, attitudes, whims, deeds, or any other proclivities of the management of the Association of Residents, nor that of the administration of the housing complex itself. However, the program does reflect the research done by the participants in the program who are live and live in color in studio by phone interview. And today we have one of our very, very popular guests by phone, and that is Dr. Velva Bowles of Louisiana by way of North Carolina. Thank you for joining us, sis.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
We're doing a short interview with you, and we say a half hour is a short interview with you based on the amount of information you always share and how we follow tributaries that lead from one thing to another. But suffice it to say that our program today is part 2 of how parents can prepare their child to be an A student. In part 1, we dealt with the young people, and this one we're dealing with a little bit older. And Dr. Velva Bowles, please proceed. And just prior to giving those keys and hints, let us know what your education background is as it relates to interacting with young people.
Certainly. My most intimate interaction with children started when I was still a teenager. I used to hold school. I always had my classroom. My mother had shared with others, and I got clarification. One of the most unpleasant interactions Mom and I had came after I had gone into her lingerie drawer and helped myself with some of her stockings. Some may remember we did not always wear pantyhose. There were stockings, which were long and it looked like natural skin. And the reason I helped myself with stockings out of my mother's lingerie is I was teaching in school, and all I had to teach was my younger brothers. And I wanted my school to be an all-girls school. So I took the stockings and put them on my brother's head so that they would have long hair, because my understanding at that time, boys had short hair and girls had long hair. So I took 3 of my mother's stockings and put all 3 of them on one brother's head and braided. Braided it to give a long grade so that my school could be an all-girls school and I could continue my teaching. My formal education for being familiar with children is I did internal medicine pediatric residency at Tulane Medical Center, and in doing med-peds, as we call it, I did interact for a number of years in pediatrics. And that would require from, as we would say, the birth all the way through age 18 is where pediatrics occur. I did have a clinic in South Carolina, Summerville, South Carolina, where I practiced my med-peds. And on the pediatric side, my most popular group was adolescents. And that was age 12, well, I guess you'd say 10, up to 16 is what we usually refer to as adolescents. And that's the group I most enjoy.
Excellent.
And I enjoy them because they're absolute thinkers. They don't like to have hypotheticals. If you ask them a question, it's pretty concrete. And that's difficult for some people, because a lie is always a lie and the truth is always the truth. And if you try to give them a gray area, you will be looked at with suspicion. So that would be how I would say I have interacted quite a bit and enjoy the dynamics of the tweens, which is from age 9 to 12, as well as my adolescents, which is usually 13 through, well, some would say 18. I usually say 16.
Excellent. Okay, very good.
That's my background for interacting with adolescents.
Excellent. So let's start in terms of your keys and hints to parents and guardians and grandparents in the audience?
Well, the important starting point there would be if we're talking a 9-year-old to a 12-year-old, again, that's sometimes called ingenue or tweens. This is a group which is in an awkward set. They no longer want to have that kind of coddling that we might give our 4 to 5-year-old, but yet they're not ready for the directness you might give to, let's say, your 14-year-old. If you're encouraging them for academic greatness, the biggest point I would give is always help establish the strong self-esteem. That is usually an awkward age. They're in transition physically. Young ladies are starting to develop their breasts and start their periods. Young men, their voice may be changing or cracking, or they're starting to get a growth spurt, and they're long and gangly, and oftentimes that's your acne age, when they start to first experience skin breakout. So when you're dealing with them and you're trying to get them to excel, you first have to create an environment where they feel safe. And number one thing is that they have confidence in themselves. A lot of times I think parents forget that just the way when you teach a child to ride a bicycle, you run alongside or you stay close. The same thing is when you're watching your child at any milestone transition. So if you have a young person who suddenly gets a growth spurt and they're gangly and thin and clothes looks rather comical on them, or in our day, we watch out for obesity. If you have a young lady or a young man starting to put on too much weight because they're not exercising, they're eating the wrong or too many snacks, your intervention there should not be ridicule, should not be critical, should not be punitive. And what I mean by that is if they're getting fat, you don't have to call them fatty or make fun of them. That's the worst thing you can do, particularly with young women, because that's when their self-image is being formed. And the opposite sex has the strongest influence for pain. Now, what do I mean by that? If you are a fat little boy and your mommy or your auntie or your sister's picking at you, that seems to have a larger psychological scar on the young man than if it's another male that says, come on, let's go for a jog, let's go for a swim, let me teach you how to play baseball, let's play football. So my advice is, in this awkward age, look for ways to help build self-esteem. If that young person likes to sing, encourage singing. If that person enjoys athleticism, join them. Go out and do what they enjoy. But your whole focus should be, let's make sure you feel good about yourself. If you're not one who is coach mentality or you don't give compliments easily, there are quiet activities that still give bonding. One of the activities I found that works is a coloring book. They've become back popular. They even have adult coloring books. If you are an auntie or a grandmother or a woman figure in a child's life and your access a few hours a week, make sure those hours are meaningful. Don't sit and watch TV with someone. Take them on a walk or teach them how to cook or sit down and color in a coloring book. Because while you're focused on detail, oftentimes that person will open up to you. If they don't have to look at you, if they don't have to answer hard questions being put to them, they may ask you a question that can be more telling than if you were interrogating them. So make sure the time you spend is quality time, and from the adult point of view, make sure it's well thought out. Don't just say, oh, I was with her all afternoon, when one of you sat on one end of the room and the other sat on another, and the young person's playing with a phone or a computer. That is not quality time. And you will miss signs that can come later that can be very, very life-impacting. The young lady is thinking about boys, or she has peers who have already started to date, and you could become that confidant if you spent more time, meaningful time, and you could find out her inner fears and her thoughts. And the same thing with a young man. If he's being confused, or maybe he's being bullied by his peers because he is still very innocent and others are being more, I'd say, adult aggressive, you can find that out too. So my advice from the 9 to 12-year-old, be direct, be honest, but most of all, put in the time. Don't phone it in. Be there, be present. Teach someone how to cook, teach someone how to crochet. If you can't do any of those yourself, color a book with them. Take a walk. But make sure that you are dealing with the person with nothing in between you. It's not on the phone and it's not distracted. So that's 9 to 12, is create in that young person a trust of you. Mm-hmm. And if they don't have it at home and you're like a surrogate, or you're someone who's coming from the outside as an auntie or a teacher or someone in the neighborhood who interacts with young people, I think they would agree that's number one. Create a link of trust. Let them know they can come to you. Don't be judgmental. Help them build self-esteem. And even what may sound silly to someone in that age group, it can be life and death to them. I mean, I know a young lady who was so distraught because she had a pimple on the end of her nose, and to her, it made her look like a witch, and she feared her friends would make fun of her. And although, many of us have said a pimple, that wasn't the issue. You had to react to the situation to reflect concern of the person coming to you. So always be available and honest and direct. And time is key. So that's 9 to 12. Now, academically, by that time, they should have already started to read and write and should be rather proficient. If you are an outside member, meaning like not mommy, not daddy, you don't see them on an everyday basis, you may want to set up a challenge. I worked with one of my nieces by saying, I'd like to receive a letter from you at least once a week. And when I did see her, I'd bring all my letters with me, and we worked out a deal. For every 5 letters, I did something with her that she most wanted to do. And as long as it wasn't $1,000, I try to make it happen. If she says, well, I want to spend the night in a hotel. Well, you would say, why would a 10-year-old be thinking like that? Because that's an experience she hadn't had. She wanted to go up in a plane. There was an airfield not too far from the small town where she lived. So you can make challenges for a young person that will be incentive for them to grow.
Dr.
I had
Bowles.
a situation I told her in every letter. Yes.
No. Continue.
I thought you had a question. No, I'm just saying, so you can develop activities. Your focus when you're developing activity is take them outside of their usual. We would, in our letters, when she didn't travel, but until she could go to library. And I told her in the library, our travel at the time, videos, now I guess they'd be CDs, and I guess you can even do a virtual trip. And I told her to choose a place, go and do the travel log, and I think it was Steve's. There's a guy who does, there's Rick Steves is his name. He does videos on the different places he traveled. And I asked her, I want you to send me a postcard or write me a letter to describe that trip. So we enjoyed world travel when she was just making use of a resource in her small town.
So
you can be inventive. I have a nephew, he's now an adult, who wanted to learn French, and they didn't teach it in his school system. So I gifted him with a tape recorder, and I guess some of the tapes, I forget which company I went with, but they had a set of 10 tapes that would teach French. And that was my gift. And in exchange, he needed to call me, and we would speak French to the level he understood during, I guess, we did that for over a year, such that he now is an international businessman with UPS.
Wow.
And I'd like to think that his interaction with me with French helped encourage him. So at the age 9 to 12, the adult has to be inventive. If you go and buy something off the shelf, give it to the child and walk away, that's hardly what I'm describing. And you really have to design it where you are investing time, because time is the way you show love in that age group.
No, I'm sorry. Say
modeling.
that.
They're going to copy. They're going to copy what you do. They're going to, if you get their trust, they're going to believe what you tell them. So you really got an opportunity to influence their adult life decisions.
I want to go back to this.
That's my 9 to 12-year-olds. If you're talking strictly grades, if you're saying, well, how do we get him to be an A student? I think an A student, by definition, is a well-rounded student. And if you start very young, it just happens naturally. If, let's say, you're entering someone's life, whether it's in foster care or you're now introduced to this young person, they're already 9 years old, I'd say start with the basics. Either have them read to you or you read to them. I understand that Instagram now has a reading club. The best way to get that age group involved is through joining something. Libraries in the summer sometimes do a competition on how many books this young person read. I'm not sure what their award is. I think there was several churches that did it, that you could go to Disney World. I think they took a trip to Disney World if you were the top 3 people in reading of books. And you might want to get it in some philanthropic groups involved, that you tell them, I have a contest, readers, can you donate money so we can give them a wonderful prize? Believe it or not, there was a group in Louisiana who came to New York. Their big thing was, I want to see the Big Apple. We have kids here in Alexandria who's never been to New Orleans, the Big Easy. So there are things that can be done that you and I may take for granted, where a child can see that as a major bonus. So you want to make sure they can read. A child who cannot read cannot make A's. Another thing is a child who's afraid of mathematics will not make A's. And there's a number of programs, STEM programs, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. These STEM programs, what's it called? Lafayette, Louisiana, there is one I visited. I'm sure other cities may have them. They have what's called a science museum. And you can go there just like you go to a theater. You pay a fee, and on each level they have challenges like Tesla Bowl. I hope all of you know what that is. If you don't, it is a generation of static electricity, and it teaches children about the flow of electrons. And Tesla being a person who they credit to us having electricity in our home. That he was one of the investigators or physicists who showed that you could harness this energy and have it travel along copper wire and give us power. So when a child is challenged and delighted, also in the Science Museum, they have virtual booths. And I hope everybody is aware now that young people are moving fast into the cyber sciences. And the virtual booth is when you put the goggles on, and quite literally what it does, it stimulates a part of the brain that makes you feel like you're pulling up a memory. That's why the virtual stuff works so effectively. You can see, or if you're on a roller coaster, you will feel the roller coaster. If you have motion sickness, if you tend to have motion sickness, if you do a virtual and it's the dinosaur age, these animals literally are towering over you. So you could actually spend a day in a science museum where a young person can see science not by way of homework only. That oftentimes when it's shown in an applied way, they find that fascinating. And one of the best sciences I know in mathematics is cooking. You know, if you take a group of young people into the kitchen and they want to talk about French fries, then start to talk about dividing the potato in half and dividing the potato in quarters. You can introduce math in a way that it makes sense. You can say, okay, you're going to feed 3 people. How do we need to divide this potato so we can get equal portions? So now all of a sudden they're learning how to do thirds, or they can physically cut it up and see what works. So if you're saying, how do you get an A student, my first answer is, if you're dealing with 9 to 12-year-olds, make sure that you have established a relationship, that you're not coming in on them and crowding them, causing them to change their schedule because you have some time for them. You have to have it where they are comfortable with you, and they get that way because you have been consistent. That if you're Sunday afternoon, be every Sunday, because that group expects it. If you're Thursday evening, be every Thursday. You cannot reschedule them at your convenience and not generate resentment. That's the first thing. Be consistent, be honest. Number 2, be creative. When you're with them, you might have a rule that during the hour you visit, the cell phone must be in the basket on the shelf, or during that hour, you must have your hands washed and clean while you're cooking. But you want to have it where it is your time and it's protected and it's valued. And the third thing is, what you do with that time is important. It shouldn't just be TV. Playing chess assists the child's development of the brain. Playing checkers, card games. I was looking at the jacks. I don't know how many of you remember when you bounce the ball and pick up the jacks and catch the ball. That has an eye-brain coordination that is not simulated on any of these devices that they're always playing with. So go back to some of the old school games and help them develop a part of the brain that can go unused. And they're saying that many adolescents or more teenagers are depressed and likely to have emotional instabilities because they have never done a recreational outlet. So think about that for a moment. That you're depressed because you didn't play jacks, or you're depressed because you never played hopscotch, or you never cooked a meal with someone. So we want to catch them between 9 and 12 for those activities. And an A student is groomed. It's not an overnight thing. It's not memorization. It's not browbeating. It's not an expensive tutor. I hope you're watching TV how rich people were trying to pay people to change the scores of their children to get into certain universities. It's sad when we've gotten to a point that a parent is breaking the law trying to make the child look smart. That is not necessary. So 9 to 12, I hope I covered that group. Does that sound like what you were looking for, Brother Leroy?
You asked me a question like that. We can move on to
the older group if you like.
You asked me a question like that. Is that what I was looking for? I didn't even know what I was looking for. And you gave a whole, you gave a Costco presentation. I'm here taking notes. And let's go back to the letter writing. I want to go back to the letter writing agreement that you had with the young girl.
Okay.
Go through that again.
Okay. Well, 2 things will come out of that. First, I asked my mature. When I say mature, I'm going to say anybody older than 50. You need to take a moment and find out if your child can even read cursive. This was many years ago. I was in San Diego, and I caught a bus because I love riding local transportation. And there was a lady, obviously an upper middle class female, white female, who was just ranting. And she saw me, and she came and got up from where she was sitting and sat beside me and began ranting. She says, "I'm on my way to UC, and it's because of my daughter." And I'm thinking, okay, what'd your daughter do? And she says, "My daughter called me, and she is an excellent student, and she's a second-year student, and she called me to come read a letter for her." And I'm thinking, is your daughter blind? And I'm trying to figure, why would a sophomore in college, particularly a nice college like UC San Diego, not be able to read a letter? Yeah. And she said the letter was written by her great aunt who lives in Paris. And the aunt writes in these long, beautiful strokes, because some of you remember we used to get graded for penmanship.
Right.
So we had to learn how to write cursive, and the females, it seemed they were tougher on us than the males to get a beautiful hand. Well, when Auntie sent the letter, her daughter could not read it because she could not read cursive. And after that experience, I came back and asked several school officials, do they still teach penmanship in school? And they said no. I said, so is it likely a child can graduate from school and not be able to read cursive? She said, yes. Everything is either typed or print it. And they have no reason to read cursive. And I started laughing. I said, so you mean I could write something in cursive and an intelligent young person couldn't read it? And she said, yes. So you might want to check, because some of the highbrow schools put it back into the curriculum, but it's an elective. It's not like you get a grade on penmanship. So if you might take an opportunity to find out, can your child or your teenage relative read cursive, and if they can't, maybe that's a job you can take on. Or you have to go to the dollar store and buy some of those small tablets, and on the cover, if you remember those awful brown sheets of paper you couldn't erase, the cover of that little tablet, which was always turned in the landscape position, had cursive letters on the front.
Right, exactly.
So you may want to check. Might be an opportunity that instead of teaching them French or teaching them German, you can just teach them English and teach them how to do cursive hand. But yeah, in the letter writing stimulates a lot of parts of the brain. The reason we teach poetry, the reason we teach literature, is the concept of making you put hand and eye and brain on one accord. You know, spoken word, and I hope all the black audiences for me, spoken word, that's what Martin Luther King did so eloquently. That's what Jesse Jackson would do in his speeches. Nikki Giovanni was doing it so wonderfully in her speeches, and there's quite a number of people reawakening spoken word. It was very popular in Harlem back in the 20s through the 30s. Rap is a form of spoken word with music, but now it's so offensive with the language they put in it. But spoken word is the ability to express yourself in rhyme. Sometimes it's rhyme and tempo. So if you were going to go to the polished English, they talk about, it's an ionic pentameter, which simply says every line has 5 beats. And the black, we did it by drum. We go a certain rhythm because our ear likes that boom, 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 boom. So when our vocalists used to sing scat, think of Eddie Game, Billie Holiday, they weren't saying words, they were giving us tones and inflections. So when you're writing, what you're doing is training your brain in a way. There's no substitution. It's like music. If someone who plays well and so they're playing by memory, you and I or whoever doesn't play music, that's magic. Because it's like, oh my God, how do they know to move their hand and both hands at the same time? Or look at him blow that horn and how he's moving his fingers. There's a coordination between the eye, the hand, and the brain that is captured in teaching writing as well as painting and any musical instrument. So if you're not super talented and you can't teach someone music or art, you can always help them with writing.
Okay.
And once you've gotten the syntax of writing, if they have a tendency towards poetry, enforce it.
Now, when you say syntax...
Really, it's a gymnastics for the brain. That's why writing's important.
Wait a minute. Say that again?